Greetings. How's it going, guys? How you doing? My name is Lisa Edwards, and I am the CEO of the Exclusive Career. And you are listening to the Exclusive Career podcast, where we focus on all things career management, executive competencies, emotional intelligence, leadership development, career management in all its forms. My other podcast, as a reminder, is the Exclusive Career Coach, which is all job search related. And last week's episode was number 372, where I talked about how to network like a pro. So I did an episode, I don't know, 3 weeks ago on places to network and how to do it. And then last week was on how to network like a pro. So put together, it's a pretty comprehensive dive into networking. Today, we're going to be talking about the differences between burnout and misalignment. In the episode 39, 2 weeks ago on this podcast, I talked about what to do when your senior role becomes unsustainable. And I talked about how to create a plan for yourself that helps you avoid the overwhelm and really the misery of your job in the present, whether you choose to remain in that job or begin looking elsewhere. We want to make that manageable and less miserable in the meantime. And I wanted to pair that up with this content on the differences between burnout and misalignment. And I'm going to start with what that looks like for yourself as an executive. And then I want to talk about how to recognize that and what to do about it with your direct reports. And I got the idea for this concept from a colleague of mine who's been on my other podcast. His name is Mark Danaher. I did not use his content, but I did put a link in the show notes to that. It was I subscribed to his newsletter and I put it in there. I put a link in my show notes to that newsletter in case you're interested in reading his thoughts on it. I want to start with definitions. I think that's important. Here's a definition for burnout: a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It's a fuel issue. Misalignment: a lack of congruence between an individual's values, strengths, or goals and their current role or company culture. It's a fit issue. So, what all that means is you cannot rest your way out of a misalignment and you cannot pivot your way out of a burnout. So it's clearly very important to know what you're dealing with. And I got to thinking about this today because I realized that I had been painting misalignment with a pretty broad brushstroke and missing kind of the nuance of that because it's not always about I'm in the wrong career path, I'm in the wrong industry, I need to pivot. But oftentimes it is about the the forks in the road that your company takes, that your job function takes, that it can often be a new boss comes on. So it is something that has changed. Now, of course, you can start from day one in a misaligned position. But I think what happens more often, especially at a more senior level, is either you start moving up and this kind of happens if you're watching me on video. I'm kind of veering off, or you're in a role and these changes begin to happen around you with the company. There's a merger, there's a major downsize, there's a major shift in the focus of the company's products or services. The CEO changes, your direct boss changes, and all of a sudden, there is this misalignment for you, and you don't necessarily realize that that's what's going on. Let's talk about how that shows up in you as an executive. So, burnout signs look like this: irritability over small tasks. So, things that normally would just be no big deal become kind of a big deal. You have brain fog. You're not thinking clearly. You're not processing information and making decisions as quickly and efficiently as you used to. Physical fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. Think about that one. Physical fatigue that sleep does not fix, and a cynical view towards previously enjoyed projects. So you just sort of become cynical and kind of have a negative viewpoint of all of it. Misalignment signs. Feeling like an imposter, and this is because the role demands skills that you don't value. Oftentimes, misalignment happens when you are using what we call burnout skills, things you're very good at, but you don't love doing. And then there's also this value piece. Like I'm having to do a lot of this thing that doesn't seem important. And I used to be doing this thing over here that felt very important. So feeling like an imposter. And then the Sunday scaries, despite a manageable workload. So even though there's nothing about Monday, which is the day that it's going to be for most of us, there's nothing about Monday that should give you the Sunday scaries. You are definitely suffering from it regardless. And a sense of, is this all there is? Is this all I'm going to get? Let's talk next about why does each of these happen? For burnout, it's the always on culture. I get a lot of, I have a lot of conversations with executives who talk about feeling like they never can put their work down, that there's never that it, and I wrote about it in a recent, or I talked about it in a recent podcast or wrote about it in a recent newsletter. It's this idea that your job is a marathon, but you're having to sprint through this marathon. You're having to go full out because there's no chance to catch your breath. It can also look like, or it can happen from carryover stress from high stakes decision making. So there's just this constant high stakes, one right after the other. You don't have this chance to recuperate. And it can also happen from the isolation of the C-suite. It can be a very isolating place, and it is particularly important for you to have those mentors and those personal relationships, especially when you're in the C-suite. Misalignment happens from things like the golden handcuffs. And if you're not familiar with that concept, it's the increased benefits, compensation, perks that you continue to get as you move up. And if you are moving away from your zone of genius each time you move up the company, or if the company is keeping you there, keep throwing things at you because they really want what you bring to the table, it can be very hard to leave that. It can be very hard to allow yourself to leave that. Also, misalignment happens from outgrowing the company's mission. I'm working with someone right now who's been in a startup situation. And while she has enjoyed the unique challenges of a startup, she's ready to be part of something bigger where things are a little bit like she likes doing different things. We all do, most of us, but 47 hats in one day has become a bit much for her. It can also be from a shift in the organization's values that no longer match your own. So again, what has changed at the top? What has changed because maybe the CEO has changed or the products and services? There's been this mismatched merger or acquisition that has occurred that all of a sudden has created a values misalignment. What's the solution? Well, for burnout, and I talked about this in the previous episode on when your job becomes unsustainable, rigorous boundary setting. So looking at what what is actually going on with my job, where am I, if I'm a level 10 employee, where am I doing level 5 work, what can I offload, what doesn't need to be done at all, what could I do that currently takes me 3 hours that I could probably put a little bit of effort into getting it down to 30 minutes. There's also a need for radical delegation of energy vampires. So those things that drain you, remember I called them burnout skills. So they're asking you to do something that just sucks the life out of you. We all have some of those in our job. The burnout is not going to occur from having to occasionally do that thing. The burnout is going to come from having to do a lot of that thing. And then I mentioned last week in that episode, creating that personal retention plan where, okay, here's how I'm going to realign my work week, my work day, my work month, whatever the case is, so that I can be happier here and be more fulfilled and not be burnt out. For misalignment, the solution is a values audit, really looking at where is the friction between what I'm put on this earth to do and what I am currently doing, and really looking at it as, has the industry changed in such a way that I no longer want to work in that industry? Is it this company, or is it the specific seat that I'm in? I remember I had a woman who worked in my office in the last university that I worked at as a career counselor or career coordinator. And I hired her out of she was a flight attendant. And back in the day when flight attendants were, making pretty good money, and her particular airline closed down, uh, big, big problem, mid-air collision, I believe it was. And I remember asking her, so they had the airline, I don't know if it was her union or whatever it was, but they had a certain amount of time, something like 5 years, to call her back up. If it wasn't, she didn't have to come, but it was like we could call you up and we may. And they did right towards the end of that time. She was already had been working for me for some time. And she told me about it, and she said that she told them no. And of course, it would have been a lot more because we were paying her nothing. And I asked her, why did you do that? And she said, it wasn't the same job that I took. So she was a little bit older than me. She started as a flight attendant back in the day when flight attendants were very well regarded. They were, people were professional. They came in dressed in their nice suits. And that change and that shift that she saw, and of course, 9/11, kind of trashed it even further. She didn't want to go back to that because that was not the job that she signed up for when she first went into that field. So those are the kind of things, is looking at where is my friction, and that it's really helpful to work with a career coach like myself on something like that. Next, let's talk about, what does this look like in your direct reports? The burnout employee. This is going to look like a high performer who suddenly is making sloppy mistakes or withdrawing. They look tired. There's just a major shift in the product that they're putting out, the way they're showing up for work. The misaligned employee is going to look like, they're a talented individual, but they are disengaged. They look bored and frustrated. So the burnout employee tends to just become chronically tired. The misaligned employee looks bored, frustrated. They might get super negative. This is where we get into quiet quitting, right? They're there, but not really. What should your response be for each of these? So to address burnout, you want to have a conversation around capacity planning. So essentially, you're going to talk with that employee. How can we clear your plate to focus on the 20% that matters? So whether this is time management, taking some things off their plate, getting them an assistant or some support. And of course, this is all based around, is this an employee that you want to save, that has been great, can be great again, you want to retain this client. The goal here is recovery, getting them back to stasis. When it's misalignment, your action then becomes job crafting or internal mobility. Your conversation is around, what parts of this role feel most like work for you, and where do you feel like you're underutilizing your strengths? The goal then is to re-engage them. How can we swap out some assignments, give you something that will excite you again? Or is it time for you to move to another department, another area of the company that excites you? And, doing that in a way that is respectful and supportive of that employee. What are the strategic implications of each? The cost of misdiagnosis is that if you give a misaligned person a month off, they will return just as unhappy as they were when they left because they didn't need rest. If you give a burned out person a more exciting project, that might be what finally breaks them. Your responsibility as the executive is to create a culture where alignment checks are as common as performance reviews. And I hate to even make that connection because a lot of people do very infrequent performance reviews. But I've talked previously in a session that I think is very applicable here about how to turn your one-on-ones into a more productive meeting for both of you. And this is a good time to say, hey, where's the misalignment? How are you feeling as far as your energy level, to get a sense of that, and not allowing it to get to the critical point. I wanted to finally wrap up with some great questions. First of all, the questions to ask yourself uh, as the executive. Here's an energy audit. If you woke up tomorrow with a full tank of gas, completely rested and energized, would you still be excited about the specific problems you have to solve today? If the answer is no, you aren't burned out, you're misaligned. Because again, rest isn't going to cure it. Next is the why versus how. When you think about your work, are you frustrated by how much you have to do, which is a sign of burnout, or are you struggling to remember why you are doing it in the first place, which is misalignment? Here are some questions to address with your direct reports. First of all, we have the talent drain. Look at your top performer who seems to be slipping. Are you trying to fix their productivity with a deadline extension when what they actually need is a different seat on the bus? And then there's the culture check. Are you running an organization that rewards grind until people burn out? Or are you running one that ignores fit until your best talent simply loses interest? And then finally, the move forward, the 90-day vision. If nothing changes in your current environment over the next 90 days, which is a greater risk to your legacy? That you'll run out of steam, or that you'll realize you've been climbing the wrong mountain? And then finally, the ROI of you. As an executive, your judgment is your most valuable asset. Is your current state of exhaustion, whether from volume or friction, compromising the quality of the decisions you're making for your company? Self-awareness is your greatest competitive advantage. And I hope that these questions and this conversation will help you have greater self-awareness. I'll see you next week. Take care.